The frost appeared first on the inside of the window, not outside. It spread in a thin lace across the oiled paper, growing inward as the night deepened. By dawn, it would reach the center. Eliza Rowan noticed it without surprise. She sat on a low bench beside the hearth, boots unlaced, hands wrapped around a tin cup that had gone lukewarm an hour earlier. The fire behind the stone lip burned low, not dead yet, but thinking about it. The last split log had settled into coals, and she was measuring time by how long they glowed. Winter in the high mountains did not announce itself loudly. It arrived by subtraction. Heat first, then sound, then movement. Outside her cabin, the wind combed through the pine stands with a sound like breath pulled slowly through teeth. Snow lay deep enough now that each step would be work. She had learned to count her movements carefully once the ground disappeared. Eliza lived alone on the eastern slope of the Bitterroot Range, a half-day's ride from the nearest trading post and farther still from any place that might be called a town. She had built the cabin herself 6 years earlier, hauling logs with a borrowed mule, cutting stone by hand, working until her palms split and healed and split again. It was a good cabin. No one argued that. The walls were tight. The chinking held. The roof shed snow cleanly. The fireplace drew well and did not smoke. Neighbors who passed through the valley sometimes stopped and said so, often with surprise, as if good work was unexpected from her. Stout, they would say. Better than most. Stout, Eliza had learned, was not the same as safe. The first winter after she built it, she had nearly lost 2 fingers to frostbite when a storm trapped her away from the cabin longer than expected. The second winter, a night fire burned too fast, and she woke to ice forming in her wash basin before dawn. The third winter, she learned to sleep in layers, boots nearby, axe handle within reach, just in case. By the 6th winter, she understood the truth most mountain folk accepted but never said aloud. A cabin was not protection, it was delay. Fire was the only thing standing between flesh and the cold, and fire demanded constant attention. You fed it or it punished you. You slept lightly or you paid for it in the morning. Eliza had no one to trade night watches with, no one to wake her if the fire died. If exhaustion won, the mountain would take advantage. That knowledge sat in her bones now as she watched the coals dim. She rose, stiffly, and crossed the dirt floor. Cold seeped up through her soles even with the thick leather. It always did. She stirred the fire, added 2 smaller splits instead of 1 large one, watching how they caught. Wood burned fast in this altitude. Always had. She stayed standing until the flame stabilized, then turned back toward the bench. Her eyes drifted, as they often did lately, toward the far wall, where a shovel leaned, unused. The thought had been growing there for months. It had started in late autumn, when she helped old Miriam Holt dig potatoes from a cellar cut into the hillside. Eliza had stepped down into that low earthen space and felt the temperature steady around her, neither warm nor cold, just held. The ground remembered heat. She had felt it again when she sheltered in a rock overhang during a sudden snow squall while hunting. The stone radiated something slow and patient, not warmth exactly, but refusal to freeze. Then there were the stones of her hearth. Even hours after the fire died, they stayed warm enough to sting bare skin. Wood gave heat away quickly. Earth and stone did not. That difference had begun to trouble her. Tonight, as the cabin settled and the fire steadied, Eliza pulled her blanket closer and let her thoughts run where they wanted. Why, she wondered, did cabins surrender their warmth so easily? Why did all that effort vanish the moment flames stopped? She did not have schooling. She had never read a book on construction or science. What she had was time, silence, and the habit of noticing. Heat rose. That much was obvious. It pooled uselessly near the rafters while her feet froze. The ground beneath her cabin was colder than the air itself, drawing warmth downward like a debt being paid. Her floor was her enemy. That thought came to her suddenly, clearly enough that she sat up straighter. The floor was the problem. She slept above frozen earth, separated only by packed dirt and planks laid directly atop it. No matter how well the walls held, the cold rose from below, patient and relentless. She fed the fire again before sleeping, not because it needed it yet, but because she did not want to wake up and do it later. When she finally lay down, she did not sleep easily. The next morning arrived brittle and pale. Her breath smoked inside the cabin. The fire had survived the night, barely, leaving a nest of coals that answered when stirred. She dressed quickly, pulled on gloves, and stepped outside. The valley lay silent under snow, the sky clean and hard. Smoke rose from one distant cabin near the creek, thin and determined. Others farther off showed nothing yet. Eliza chopped wood until her shoulders burned, stacking splits neatly along the wall. She worked to stay warm, but also because the motion settled her thoughts. By midday, she had made a decision. She would dig. The ground near the north wall was already hard, but not frozen solid yet. She drove the shovel down, foot braced, and broke through the top layer with effort. Each scoop took time, each rock argued. She was not sure what she was building yet, only that it would not look like anything her neighbors expected. When Jonas Pike rode past 2 days later, he reined in and watched her work in silence. She stood knee-deep in a trench running along the cabin's edge, breath fogging, hair bound tight beneath her cap. "What's that for?" he asked finally. "A start," Eliza said, levering out a stone. He squinted. "You extending the cellar?" "I don't have one." "Well, you're digging like you do." She paused, resting both hands on the shovel handle. "Ever notice how your cellar never freezes?" she asked. Jonas shrugged. "That's the point of it. And ever notice how your floor never stays warm?" He frowned, considering. "That's just how cabins are." Eliza nodded. "That's what I used to think." Jonas watched her another moment, then shook his head. "Winter's coming early this year. You'd be better off stacking wood than digging holes." She did not answer. He rode on. The trench deepened day by day. She worked when the sun allowed, and rested when it did not. By the end of the week, a rectangle cut the earth around her cabin like a shadow. Neighbors stopped more often now. Some asked questions. Some offered advice she did not take. Some said nothing at all. By the first heavy snowfall, she had uncovered enough stone to see possibility. Eliza stood in the trench one evening, hands aching, and pressed her palm to the exposed rock. It held the day's warmth, even as the air sharpened. She smiled, small and tired. The mountain was teaching her something, and she was finally listening. Snow came early that year, not in storms but in warnings. Thin falls that dusted the ground and vanished by noon. Cold nights that left iron stiff and breath sharp. The mountain was not threatening yet, only reminding. Eliza took the reminders seriously. By the time the first true snowfall arrived, the trench around her cabin was finished. It ran the full perimeter, deeper than any foundation she had ever seen on a frontier cabin, nearly 2 feet down in places, cut clean and squared as best as hand tools allowed. Standing in it made the world feel higher. The ground level rose above her shoulders, and the cabin walls looked suddenly temporary, like something resting on borrowed time. She did not mind. The next phase took longer, and it was harder. Stone. Not the loose field rock that could be gathered by hand, but dense, heavy pieces that held their shape and weight. Granite from the ridgeline. Basalt slabs pried loose where frost had already done half the work. She hauled them one by one with a sled improvised from split logs, the runners greased with fat. Each trip took hours. Each stone demanded planning. If she misjudged the slope or her footing, the mountain would not forgive her. Her horse watched from the tree line, ears flicking, wisely uninvolved. By the time she began setting stone into the trench, the valley was watching too. Miriam Holt came first, leaning on her cane, studying the work with narrowed eyes. "That's too much stone for a floor," she said. "It's not for the floor," Eliza replied, lowering a block into place. Miriam waited. Eliza said nothing more. Jonas Pike returned with 2 other men, both curious and openly doubtful. They crouched near the trench, poking at the fitted stones with boot toes. "You're building walls underground," one said. "Yes. For what?" "So they hold heat." Jonas laughed softly. "Stone's cold. Only if you never warm it," Eliza said. They left unconvinced. By late autumn, the trench was no longer a trench. It had become a continuous ring of stone, thick and solid, rising slightly above ground level. Each piece was fitted with care, gaps filled with clay and ash, weight doing most of the work. When she finally stood back and looked at it, the shape was unmistakable, a boundary. The inside of that boundary was now a shallow pit. The future of her cabin sat lower than the land around it, like something being set into the mountain rather than placed upon it. The mockery came quietly, carried on breath and distance. "She's burying her house. She's gone strange. Grief does that." Eliza heard none of it directly, but the pauses in conversation when she rode past told her enough. She did not hurry. The joists came next. She selected straight logs and peeled them clean. She notched them carefully where they would rest on the stone, shaping wood to stone until each settled without rocking. They ran close together, closer than any cabin floor she had seen. It cost her extra days, extra effort, extra pain, but when she stood on them, the framework felt like something meant to last. The space beneath them remained empty for a while, a dark cavity between stone and wood, waiting. That waiting made people uneasy. "What happens when the cold gets in there?" Jonas asked one evening, watching her from the edge. "It won't," Eliza said. "You can't stop cold." "No," she agreed, "but you can slow it." He shook his head. "You're betting your life on dirt and rock." "I already was," she said. "I just didn't realize it." She began hauling sawdust from the small mill downriver. The mill owner laughed when she asked for it. "Take as much as you want," he said. "Saves me hauling it." She mixed it with pine needles, dry moss, crushed charcoal from old fire pits. She worked by feel, by smell, by instinct. She knew what packed too tight felt like. She knew what would breathe and what would smother. Layer by layer, she filled the cavity beneath the joists. It looked wrong, like compost, like rot waiting to happen. People said so. Mice would move in. It would mold. It would collapse. It would stink. Eliza sealed every edge. Clay, hair, resin, no gap left unanswered. When she laid the floor planks on top, thick and tight, the cabin felt different immediately. The sound changed. Footsteps sounded solid, grounded. The floor sat higher now. She needed a step to enter her own door. By the time the first real storm came, the walls were up and the roof was on. Not pretty, functional, heavy with intent. She built the hearth last, fitting stone until it drew clean. When she lit the first fire, she did not celebrate. She watched. Hours passed. The cabin warmed. Smoke rose straight and steady. She knelt and pressed her hand to the floor. Nothing at first. Then, slowly, a suggestion. A whisper of warmth that did not come from the air. She fed the fire all afternoon, let it burn strong and honest. When night came, she let it die. The cold crept in. The air thinned. Frost reached for the window again, but the floor held. Not hot, never hot, just not cold. She slept. Outside, winter gathered itself, and the mountain waited to see if she had learned enough. The real cold did not arrive with snow. It arrived with silence. One morning, Eliza stepped outside and heard nothing at all. No wind in the pines, no creek movement beneath the ice. Even her own breath seemed swallowed before it traveled far. The valley lay pinned beneath a pale sky, motionless, as if the world itself were holding still. She had learned what that meant. She brought in extra wood before noon and banked it along the south wall. She checked the door seal, pressed clay back into a thin seam she had been watching. She tested the floor panels she had built into the planks, lifting one just enough to feel the air rise from below. It was warmer than the cabin air. That still surprised her. By nightfall, the temperature dropped sharply. Stars sharpened. The moon threw light like broken glass across the snow. Eliza fed the fire steadily until late evening, then stopped herself. This was why she had built the cabin this way. She let the fire die. The hours passed differently without the ritual of rising to tend it. She lay awake for a while, listening. The cabin creaked softly as wood and stone adjusted. No rushing cold climbed her legs. No ache formed in her fingers. Sometime before dawn, she slept. She woke to light and cold air, but not danger. The inside of the cabin was chill enough that she pulled her coat on before standing, but her breath did not fog. The water bucket had not frozen. When she swung her legs down, the floor met her feet with a muted warmth that felt almost alive. Outside, the temperature was brutal. Later, she would learn it had fallen farther than anyone expected. That morning, Jonas Pike woke stiff and angry, his fire having burned too fast in the night. He spent an hour coaxing life back into frozen embers, hands shaking, jaw tight. Miriam Holt woke coughing. Her small cabin rhymed with frost so thick the walls glittered. By midday, the valley was moving. People stepped outside, tested the air, went back in. Smoke poured from chimneys in thick, desperate columns. Axes rang as men cut wood they had hoped not to touch yet. Eliza stayed inside and watched her walls. The stone behind the hearth held warmth like a memory. The floor continued to give back what it had taken the day before. The cabin cooled, but it did so slowly, reluctantly, as if arguing with the cold rather than surrendering to it. By the second night, the cold deepened. The wind returned, sharp and searching. It found weaknesses everywhere. Someone knocked on her door just after dusk. Jonas stood outside, face red, eyes tired. "Your fire's not smoking," he said without greeting. "No. You sick?" "No." He shifted, boots crunching. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. Jonas crossed the threshold and stopped. The cabin was not warm, not comfortable, but it was steady. The air did not bite. The walls were dry. No frost reached for the corners. He took another step, then another, as if testing something invisible. "You let it die?" he asked. "Yes." "How long?" "Since last night." Jonas frowned and knelt. He placed his gloved hand on the floor, then pulled the glove off and pressed his palm flat. He stayed that way for a long moment. "That's not right," he said quietly. Eliza lifted one of the floor panels. Warm air rose, faint but undeniable. She did not explain. She did not need to. Jonas left an hour later without argument. By morning, 2 more people came. By evening, 3. No one mocked now. No one laughed. They came with stiff movements and careful questions. They stood too long near the hearth, hands spread, not from greed but disbelief. The cold did not break. It stayed. It pressed. It punished. Wood piles shrank. Fires were fed until exhaustion blurred judgment. One man downriver burned through half his winter supply in 3 days. Another cracked ice inside his cabin just to get water. Eliza rationed her wood. She burned during the day, stored heat, slept through the nights. On the 4th day, Miriam Holt arrived wrapped in every blanket she owned. She did not ask permission. She simply stepped inside and sat. Eliza put more water on the hearthstones and watched steam lift slowly. That night, Miriam slept on a pallet near the wall. The floor beneath her stayed warm enough that her coughing eased. By morning, color had returned to her face. Word spread faster after that. People came to look, to feel, to understand. Eliza showed them the stones, the depth, the insulation mixture, the way heat moved downward before it rose. Some listened, some only nodded, but they remembered. When the cold finally loosened its grip, the valley looked different. Wood piles were low, faces were drawn, but everyone was alive. In the weeks that followed, people came back not to shelter, but to learn. How deep did you dig? What stone did you use? Would it work under my cabin? Eliza answered patiently. She showed them what she could. She warned them what would not be easy. "This takes time," she said again and again. "It takes effort. You can't rush it." Some nodded and never returned. Others came back with shovels. By the time spring lightened the snow, 2 new trenches cut the valley floor. Eliza worked alongside them when asked. She hauled stone. She measured depth. She corrected mistakes gently. She did not charge. She did not boast. The mountain watched all of it and remembered when the next winter came. Fewer chimneys smoked through the night, and fewer people feared sleep. Spring did not arrive all at once. It loosened the valley a little at a time. Snow withdrew from the south-facing slopes first, revealing dark earth and flattened grass. The creek broke free in stages, groaning beneath ice before finally running clear. The air softened, though the nights still warned against carelessness. Eliza welcomed the thaw, but she did not rush it. She had learned that the mountain rewarded patience. When the ground could be worked again, she walked the valley, not to inspect her own work, but to see what had changed. 2 new foundations were already underway. Jonas Pike had dug his deeper than anyone thought necessary. Miriam Holt's sons worked in shifts, setting stone with a care they had never shown before. They asked fewer questions now. They knew what the work was for. Eliza helped when asked and stayed silent when not. She showed how to choose stone that held heat, how to fit it tight, how to seal edges so cold air could not steal what the fire gave. She explained the movement of warmth in plain terms, pointing, demonstrating, letting hands feel the difference. She never spoke of invention, only of attention. By midsummer, 3 cabins in the valley held warmth differently than the rest. Their floors did not ache with cold in the mornings. Their walls stayed dry in winter storms. Their occupants slept longer, woke clearer, worked better. The change was subtle, but it mattered. Word traveled outward, as it always did. Traders noticed they were not asked for as much firewood. Travelers commented on cabins that felt different underfoot. Questions followed. Eliza answered what she could. She did not leave the valley, but the valley carried her work beyond her. Years passed. Winters came and went. Some were gentle. Others tested everyone again. Each time, fewer people burned through their reserves in fear. Fewer rose in the night to feed dying flames. Children slept without waking to frost creeping toward their blankets. Old bodies endured nights that once would have broken them. The mountain still demanded respect, but it no longer took payment in surprise. Eliza aged the way the land did, slowly, visibly, without apology. Her hair silvered, her hands stiffened. She worked less with tools and more with instruction. Younger settlers listened now, not because she insisted, but because experience had already taught them. When asked why she had done it, she never spoke of pride or legacy. She spoke of the floor. How it felt, she would say, that first morning. Not warm, just kind. In her later years, she sat more often near the hearth, not for heat, but for comfort. The stones still remembered. The floor still gave back what it had taken long before. One winter, heavier than most, a storm trapped the valley for days. Snow buried fences, wind scoured the ridges, fires failed in places they should not have. No one died. That spring, someone carved a small mark into a beam in Eliza's cabin. Not her name, just a symbol, 3 simple lines stacked one over the other. Stone, insulation, floor. Eliza saw it and smiled once, faintly. When she was gone, the cabin remained. Others lived there. Others learned from it. The work beneath the floor went unnoticed by those who did not know to look, but it continued doing what it had always done, holding, remembering, giving back slowly. The mountain did not forget her, and neither did the people who finally learned how to listen to it. Epilogue. Long after Eliza Rowan stopped rising before dawn, the cabin continued to do so. Morning light still reached the eastern wall first. It still crept across the planks in a thin band, warming the grain where hands and feet had passed for decades. The hearthstones still held the day before inside them. The floor still answered cold with patience instead of panic. People came and went. Families moved through the valley in waves, some staying a season, some staying a lifetime. They learned quickly which cabins were different, not by sight, but by feel. By the way a child could sit on the floor and play in winter without crying. By the way sickness did not sharpen at night. By the way sleep came without fear. The old ones remembered Eliza best. They remembered how she worked without explanation, how she let doubt pass through her like weather, how she never argued with the mountain, only adjusted to it, how she taught with her hands first and her words second. They remembered the winter when the valley learned that survival did not have to be desperate. When new builders arrived, they were told simple things. Dig deeper than you think. Stone first. Air matters. Wood is was to ting. Cold moves slower if you make it. Some listened. Some did not. Those who did passed the knowledge on without names attached. It became habit, practice, common sense. By the time anyone thought to ask where it came from, it no longer mattered. The mountain kept its own record. Spring after spring, the ground settled around those buried foundations, locking them into place. Frost lines shifted. Snow came and went. Heat moved slowly, the way Eliza had learned it would. Nothing flashy endured. Nothing loud. Just warmth where it was needed, when it mattered most. And if someone ever wondered why one cabin felt kinder than another, the answer waited beneath their feet, quiet, unseen, and doing its work exactly as it had been taught. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider to hype our video to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.